Let's talk about how much it costs to learn Japanese acupuncture and moxa in a Japanese-based in Japan school, and why I don't recommend it to become confident and competent in Japanese acupuncture. I'm going to give you some better options to maximize your money and time when studying Japanese acupuncture and moxa. This video is packed with tons of information, so buckle up. Now, before we get started, please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that little bell to be notified of future videos coming out all about Japanese acupuncture and moxa. Before we get into the numbers, I just want to tell you why I decided to make this video. Now, as you may know, I ran a lifetime membership and mentorship program called Shinkyu University, and I do that based on my education that I received in Japan. And because of that, a lot of people do reach out to me to ask me how I did it, how I was able to go to Japan, study in Japan, get licensed there, and then continue to practice. When speaking to these eager and excited acupuncturists, I talk about 3 things in general to get them started on this new amazing venture that they're planning on starting. So the very first thing that I always ask people when they're planning on going to Japan to study Japanese acupuncture and moxa is, how good is your Japanese? Many people are like, oh, I have decent Japanese and I can speak. You need to have excellent Japanese in order to go to a Japanese-based acupuncture and moxa school. To pass that acupuncture and moxa school's exams, their national exit exams, and of course, the national licensing exams, you need to have amazing Japanese in order to do this. So if you haven't already, the first thing that you're going to want to do is become extremely proficient in the language. I would also like to add, as this is a question I get quite frequently, there is no English educational model for acupuncture in Japan. It does not exist. And so if you want to learn acupuncture in Japan, you will have to do it like I did in Japanese. So the second thing that I always tell acupuncturists who are wanting to learn acupuncture in Japan is you're gonna need a lot of money. Just a side note here, if you're watching this video and not doing anything with your hands, you're missing out on an amazing opportunity to improve your technique. I highly suggest that you practice something super simple like how to reload your guide tube. Now, if you're unsure about how to reload your guide tube, I have a video linked somewhere up here on how to do it. It's really not that difficult. You're just going to, and I break this down more in the video, you're going to take your needle, insert it into your guide tube, allow it to drop, and then twist it around. This is a pivotal technique that you really do learn in Japanese acupuncture school because the Japanese do reuse the needle on the patient that they're practicing on at that moment. Of course, not in between clients. So I highly suggest either practicing guide tube reload or your guide tube tap in, and you'll see me practicing it throughout this entire video. So the second thing I often tell people who are looking forward to study in Japan to get their acupuncture and moxa level up to par is that they're gonna need a lot of money. So let's talk about exactly how much money, and I'm gonna do that. That's why I'm practicing a contact needling technique that I teach within Shinkyu, which just is a guide tube tap. You'll notice I'm not actually putting in the needle. So so for my education, it cost me around $60,000, including living expenses and tuition in order to graduate just from acupuncture school. It cost me around $80,000 to get my actual education in Japanese. Now that's a conservative estimate because most of my education was done in Japan and not at school. I do think that there's a cheaper way to get your Japanese language education, and that's simply to go get a job in Japan and just start working there. It is difficult to get a visa outside of an English teacher's job, and if you get an English teacher's job, spoiler alert, they will not let you speak Japanese. All right, so just living in Japan for the decade plus that I lived there, a conservative estimate, maybe it cost me, I don't know, 100 grand, you know, who knows how much it costs when you actually live somewhere, pay rent, water, taxes, electricity, all of those things. Perhaps it cost me upward of 240. I don't really have a good number for this, but it cost me a lot of money. And to be quite honest, most of my language ability And my connections within Japan were just made by living there and searching them out. It's not something that you can go and get within a day or two unless you have connections through someone else. But, I would say that maybe $20,000 a year times 10 years, so around $240,000 is a pretty conservative estimate for living expenses all in all. So that's just to live. Now, for my extracurricular activities of actually studying Japanese acupuncture, traveling to and from teachers' houses, paying them for teaching, joining my acupuncture groups, all of that, I would say all in, more than likely I've spent around $5,000. And last, this one's the clincher. In order to transfer my license back to my country of origin, which is the United States, it cost me around $20,000 in 5 years of my life. Now, it was very difficult for me to transfer my license here. You may live in a country where you don't have to go through that experience, but the US is very strict. I did have to go back into an acupuncture school here in order to get supervised clinical hours, even though I had 10 years of clinical experience. I did have to sit for the national boards here in the US, and that all happened because I decided that I wanted the option in order to live both in the US where my family is and or live in Japan where my husband's family is. So overall, in order to get all of the education that I was able to get in Japan, you need a ton of money. Like, it's a lot of money, a lot of time. I've spent at least, at this point, almost 15 years of my life. And, it's just a lot of time, energy, and effort. So all in all, I spent 10 plus years and a grand total of $520,000 with rough estimates. That's over $500,000 of US money in order to get to the place that I am right now. So I've thrown out an astronomical number and a very long period of time that I have spent in order to get my acupuncture and moxa to a place where I feel at least confident and competent with the patient in front of me enough to treat them. Do I have more to study? Of course I do. But that brings me up to number 3, and that is time. How much time would you actually have to spend for studying Japanese acupuncture and moxa in Japan in order to get to the same stage that I'm at? Well, let's just talk about the basic education. So you're going to need at least 4 years of basic education. That's 3 years for the actual schooling and another year, half a year or so in order to take your national exams. Now, if you're like me and you're a bad test taker and you fail your national exams, spoiler alert, I did fail my national exams once. I am not proud of it, but yes, I did it because I suck at tests. Then you actually have to wait a whole another year in order to take that test again, because it's only offered one time a year and it is still written down on paper. There are no computers for the national exams in Japan. Now, after that period of 4 years, you're going to actually have to spend time to study with a master in Japan in order to get actual skills and not just your foundation. Now, this is where things get really complicated, and it brings me up to number 4. So, number 4, in order to accomplish all the money that you're going to need to study, all the time that you're going to need, you're also going to have the proper visa. Now, in order to get the proper visa, you're going to have to do it in one of 2 ways. The first, well, maybe 3. The first is that you can chance to be from a country that Japan accepts as someone who can apply for citizenship. Now, these tend to be more third world countries, but it is an option. The second, you can marry a Japanese citizen. This is because only Japanese citizens are allowed to take student loans out in order to pay for their education in Japan. Now, the third way that you can study at an acupuncture school in Japan is that you got to have a lot of money in the bank. In fact, you have to have around $60,000 to $100,000 US in the bank in order to pay for your tuition, living expenses, books, all the other things that you would do while you're living in a country for 3-4 years, right? You do not have to have a special visa in order to study in a school. You can get like a student visa, but you cannot take out student loans. So it's very difficult to get that much money in the bank, but if you have it, well, then you have it and you have that opportunity. So I've talked about 4 different things that you're going to need to have in order to study Japanese acupuncture and moxa in Japan in order to become confident and competent in it in your practice. And those are, of course, time, energy, effort, and a lot of money, right? A lot of money is what that really does boil down to. So let's talk about the opposite side of the coin. Let's talk about people who are considered advanced acupuncturists here in the West or any country outside of Japan, aside from China and Korea, and how much time and money that they've spent on getting their skills to a level where they feel confident and competent with their patients in front of them with Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion. Okay, so you ready for this? So most acupuncturists, outside of their regular TCM education, they're spending somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000 and around 10 years just to get a good idea about how to use Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion alongside their TCM. Now, most acupuncturists that I did talk to mentioned that this time was priceless. You couldn't put a dollar amount on it, but when you do put a dollar amount on it, it is important because not everyone has that dollar amount, and it can be very prohibitive to your studies, especially when you want to do Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion, but you might not have the time or resources in order to do so. Now, I actually came up with Shinkyu University while helping on the In Touch Japan seminar, which I run every year in November. And seeing acupuncturists who are really excited to learn this medicine come to Japan without foundational skills, and they spend around $3,000 minimum on coming to Japan between airfare and hotels and the price of the studies. And then they go home with a foundational slight understanding of how to do the work. Or these acupuncturists are going to workshops. Now, often the workshops are not in their hometown. They're across the world, they're across the country, they're in another state, they're in another city. And then there's taking time away from their clinics, they're taking time away from their families, they're spending the money to go do that, and then they also don't have continued mentorship. And so you can kind of see where I'm going with this. When you don't have a teacher that can continue helping you through your career, right? You have a question about a technique you learned, about a theory you learned, you apply it, and then that question becomes bigger, and now you don't have anybody to answer that question, right? Until the next workshop. That might be 6 months from now, that might be next year, that might be in another town. You might not be able to go. And so you can see how the barriers to learning start to really mount up. So if you could sign up to a course that could give you foundational, technical, and theoretical understanding to prepare you for master level courses, to prepare you to be confident and competent in your clinic, that cost you half the price and half the time, and it gave you consistent mentorship for the lifetime of your career, it would be a no-brainer to sign up, right? Now, I know I just threw a lot of really big numbers and a lot of, like 10 years, 20 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I threw a lot of numbers in your face, and it probably kind of blew your mind. I know it blew my mind when I first calculated how much time and money I had really spent on my career. But I really want to come and tell you a little bit of time, energy, and effort, and direct and exact mentorship. It doesn't have to take you that long, and it doesn't have to cost you that much. You can do this. I know you can. So if you would like to cut thousands of dollars and years off the advancement of your career, please do sign up for an interview for Shinkyu University, which is linked in the description box below. This program is set up exactly for practitioners like yourself who are looking to advance their career and become confident and competent in Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion. As always, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe button, and that little bit of bell to be notified of future videos coming out all about Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion and so much more. And if you're looking to watch another video about all the things that I wish I had known before starting my career in Japanese acupuncture and moxibustion, then just check out this video right over here.